Hello everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to our day three of Microsoft Azure Learning. So this is the day three, and we are going to talk about and cover compute services, which is one of the most important part of any cloud migration strategy and architecture, and especially for the people who are cloud engineer or cloud solution architect, or the people who are in the learning phase and they are planning to become the cloud engineer or solution architect. So infrastructure plays a major role, and infrastructure covers lot of services. So we will try to explore, try to learn from that area. So as always, you can post your question. I will try to answer after the presentation as well as demo, and you can share it with the hashtag on your social media, like hashtag Learn Cloud with me. It will be really helpful. And do subscribe to my channel, as well as open your notepad and pen, and the presentation, everything will be published after the end of a day, and I will update the link in the description. So let me share my display presentation, and we will start talking about the Azure Compute Services. And meanwhile, you can share that whether I'm audible properly. And here I'm sharing my display also, and if everyone will be able to see my display and presentation as well as the audio is fine. I'm looking for a couple of responses. After that, I will proceed. So I think people are able to hear me, and the presentation is also visible. So let's get started. So compute is something like the core of any cloud platform. I will share that idea, like how it is becoming the major part. But the agenda of today is like we will talk about what are the different compute services, and I will give you some information walkthrough. Especially, we are focused more on the virtual machine part today, how it will build and what kind of virtual machine services flexibility are there are provided by Microsoft Azure, as well as the security. And then we will touch upon the other important services, which is the Kubernetes, the managed Kubernetes platform available on Microsoft Azure, as well as the new kind of services, not actually new, but it is creating a lot of buzz in the whole ecosystem, which is a serverless. And we will talk about Azure functions, right? So I believe most of the people have see such kind of diagram before also. And if you are new, so this is something like we follow, which will define like what will be the the responsibility for the cloud provider, or what will be the responsibility of a customer from a different layer. So let me explore and explain this. Like, let's say if we want to set up our data center uh, in our on premises office, or we have our space, so we need to follow this the the first this column. We need to really build it from ground. We need to focus on the cooling as well as the space, then all these component of networking, storage, server, physical server, hardware, operating system licenses, or whatever the middleware license, if it is a proprietary or open source, we really need to manage it from our side. When it comes to the cloud platform, because we don't have a physical access, as on the day one I explained about the software defined things, so we will be not able to touch and see the physical hardware, but we will get the access from the operating system layer. Till virtualization layer, it is managed by, in the case of Microsoft Azure, is managed by Microsoft, and they have maintained the underneath layer, let how the the power, cooling, networking, the physical security, everything is taken care. And from the operating system, we got the access. Like, from the operating system, it's our responsibility, like right, like what we need to install, how we need to configure, if we want to modify some kind of operating system settings files, that is in our hand. Obviously there are some kind of pre-built optimize operating systems are also available, which is at its best maximum settings, but again it is in our hand. If we want to tweak it, if we want to make it suitable to work with our custom application, so there comes the infrastructure part. And why this is important, because see, if any organization wants to plan their cloud journey and they have a legacy application, because cloud is providing, yes, managed services, platform as a services, all those things, but not everything is provided, right? So that is where the infrastructure plays the major role, because if we have a OS level access, we can install whatever the desired configuration binaries we need to put. According to that, we can install and we can set up and we can build our application architecture and the migration part. And I see from the last 2 years couple of reports, and it is saying that till date only 8 to 10% of infrastructure from overall IT is migrated or running on cloud. Still, 85 to 90% is running on premises. So really, guys, imagine that how big the opportunities will be there in the market. It is just a start. Like, cloud started booming, cloud is coming with the new feature and flexibility, where this kind of this third column come into picture, which is as a platform as a service or PaaS. In this kind of area, we will get a pre-configured even runtime. There are a lot of services which is apart from the Microsoft Azure. If people used Heroku is something like application hosting platform. We need to only configure that we want some Ruby on Rails this runtime or something Python, and we will get our that pre-ready made runtime whole environment, and we will be only focused on how we will our build the application and the data. So that is come into the platform as a service kind of platform. So in Microsoft Azure there are multiple platforms, like even the databases, because the database management of database is damn painful. You can talk with any DBA who are managing the database servers at a scale. He or she will surely share will be able to share that how it is tough to to maintain the availability, the synchronization, everything. So it is very important there. This the cloud platform come into picture and providing such kind of services, where you can only access till the the data and application layer, not the operating system layer. In some cases, yes, operating system layer access is there. It is not that fully not, but it can come under the mix of infra plus PaaS, but depend upon whether you really want to access the operating system or not. It's up to a choice of a development team as well as the cloud engineer and the people who are going to manage, right? And software as a service, or other words, it's called as a subscription as a service. There are many definition of SaaS, so let's stick with the simplistic software as a service, which is common. It is something that everything is pre-built, every application is provided by the platform or the provider. We are as an end user going to access it, and we are going to pay as our subscription. So these are the common layers which we all need to be clear about cloud computing, and like which service will fit best and what kind of architecture we are going to design. It may vary. So coming to our topic of a day on the compute services. So we are going to talk about the virtual machine, Kubernetes service, and the next two is the serverless kind of, like the container instance is something that it is a serverless Kubernetes, you can say, or serverless container instances, in which we just put our code and it will run and complete the task, and it can scale also automatically. So functions are the serverless functions. It is a block of code which will be triggered according to the whatever the logic you will put. Dedicated host comes from the virtual, not the virtual machine, but from the again the infrastructure or bare metal hardware kind of. So I will explain like what is the different of the dedicated host. And If you know about Microsoft is covering a lot of technology. So they have their own database engine named MS SQL or Microsoft SQL Server. So they are providing in it in a multiple flavor. So in the past, it's known as SQL DB, Azure SQL DB, and in the compute services, it comes a pre-configured. Let's say we want MS SQL Server 2016 Enterprise Edition, so it will be installed, and if we want to configure it with some kind of high availability, all these kind of things will be there, and plus the licensing cost will be included. That is an important part which I am going to focus maybe a couple of minutes, right? And then VM scale set, that is the beauty, that how the infrastructure will scale. Like with the beauty of the cloud, we all heard and know about, the scale in, scale out according to the demand. The infrastructure will increase whenever the load will be less, infrastructure will be down, or it will be maybe regain its original condition or something like that, which will help us to you know get the agility and the lower cost. So all those beautiful feature come into picture, right? So let's talk about the Azure virtual machines. So these are the hypervisor based, like the virtual machine. As on day one, I explained about the hypervisor fundamental, that how these things are working. So let's say there is a hardware which is having a big capacity, big huge amount of RAM, as well as multiple CPUs, or many cores of CPUs which are physical. And on the top of that, Microsoft put this hypervisor layer. They are using the Hyper-V. This is their homegrown product, as well as some open source hypervisor layers also nowadays, with the new type of machines or new generation of machines, to get the maximum performance. As it is a continuous innovation and continuous development going from the Microsoft side. Every 6 months or a year, they are coming with the new hardware, with the new offering, with the new improvement, with the new networking capabilities. So on the top of hypervisor layer, we will get our virtual machine, and those virtual machine will be created by, again, from the control plane, because it is exposed via the API and the portal. We will create, and it will call the underneath, and it will figure out like what are the options we have choose, and what are the actual physical, and that virtualized environment is available to host that machine. So virtual machine is isolated environment on the multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy means, again, as I stating, that it's a physical hardware, a big physical hardware is there, and on the top of that, because let's say hardware is having 100 GB of RAM. I'm just taking some arbitrary number, 100 GB of RAM, and maybe let's say 64 core. It's not like only a one customer required that much. Maybe a small machines or VMs are required. So that is the logic on that hypervisor and the control plane. Like this VM or this physical host can put, let's say, 20 VM with some kind of combination, right? So that is a logically isolated. Let's say three different customer having a 10 VMs running on that physical host, but those can't talk with each other. There are again condition, because a customer one who are having the 10 VM, if they configure to talk with their 10 VM, that is possible, okay. But it is not going to talk with the customer 2 VM or customer 3 VM. It is not like that. So that is the whole concept of virtualization and hypervisor. More you can explore. I mentioned it on day one also. I focused on all these things, because these are the fundamentals of all these things. And infrastructure is the first step, or the starting point. Because if you talk about all those the new technology, but until unless the infrastructure part is not clear, because that is the biggest area of cloud, right? So it is again not only for the operations people, but it is for the developer also, because everything can be created via SDKs, as well as the command lines, right? So these are the logically isolated virtual machines on the multi-tenant environment, and the sizes are maybe from half gigabyte of RAM to even 12 terabyte of RAM hardware is available, and I believe the maximum VM size is 4 TB. After that, there is a specialized hardware which is for the special use cases, and I believe the 20 terabyte is also provided by Microsoft Azure. Again, a use case. So now you can think, even having a 4 TB, a single machine of 4 TB in house is how much tough, because first of all, purchasing that much amount of hardware and then setting up and then managing, that is very very painful. So cloud is solving such kind of problems. And now coming to, again, as it's a Microsoft, it was a very myth that it supports only the Windows ecosystem and Microsoft ecosystem, but from 2013 Microsoft even rebrand from Windows Azure to Microsoft Azure. And before even that, Linux operating system was available on Microsoft Azure or Windows Azure at that time, but they are endorsing, and there is couple of reports even I have read that now more than 50% virtual machine, whatever the overall regions are running, is Linux operating system. So you can understand the scale at which the things are running on Microsoft Azure cloud, right? As I mentioned, that there are different sizes, different purposes, because it is not that that day in a few days the new hardware is available. But yeah, it is a continuous thing. The hardware, the processor, the CPUs, which are not easily available in market, but the cloud platforms or providers are having a deep partnership with the chip provider, so they will be able to provide us as quickly as uh, possible. So there are different sizes and different generation. Let's say the Intel generation, maybe third generation, the fourth generation, nowadays sixth, seventh, eighth, and even AMDs. All these things are available, and we need to figure out our use case. According to that, we can use. Important thing is local SSD. These are maybe bit confusing but very helpful. So at the end, our virtual machine is hosted on a physical hardware, and that physical hardware is also having some kind of disk with it, right? Because I will explain in the demo that the disk which will be attached with the virtual machine, that is not, it is not residing or besides the same physical box. It is something, let's say, a different pool area of storage pool area, right, from which we are accessing, and it is moving via the network, right, and internal network of a Microsoft Azure data center. So those are the persistent disk, because there are a lot of logic I will explain now, right? So local disk is something which is physically attached to that physical box, and we can use it, and it is in the VMware SKU or the VMware configuration. We will sorry, VM configuration, not VMware, excuse me. So VM configuration I will show you in that portal while creating, like how to figure out like what kind of local SSD, because it is very near to our hypervisor. It is providing a too much of performance, but it is only a temporary purpose. Let's say some kind of cache or some kind of logs if you want to put, and there it will be helpful to serve as quickly as possible. Now think that if that physical host got some kind of issue and it got failure, and our hypervisor is so much automatic, or the magical stuff will happen, that our VM will be moved from those physical failed hardware to the healthy hardware where it will start serving, but that local physical disk will remain in that same physical box. So that is the whole scenario here, that like local SSD disk is for the temporary purpose. And now coming to our operating system disk as well as the data disk, these are the disk which will be the persistent, and it will be resides as a storage area network, and it will be via network which is a very low latency. Even we will not feel that there is any kind of latency there while accessing, because it will a real time, because it's our operating system. And data disk are apart from the operating system disk or the root volume, if we want to add some extra disk to put your application to configure your application in a way that it will store the data logs or all those things into the different disk rather than the operating system disk. So there we can attach again. Everything depend upon the size of the virtual machine. Not every virtual machine will support 64 data disk, and not, all these kind of things will be there, and we will see while creating the VM, right? And this VM need to be part of a network or the subnet. Especially yesterday we covered about the networking, and I explained about how the subnets work and how we can segregate between the public subnet and the private subnet. So this virtual machine need to be part of the network, right? And the virtual machine contains a multiple, resources or elements. So because it's a cloud computing, everything is software defined, and and the things are distributed, and we can see individually what resource are connected with, and with which resource, and how it is serving for the what purpose. So those kind of things will be there. So as it's a virtualized environment, so it is known as a vNIC, like a network interface card. It is something like, maybe even we have put multiple interface card to connect the modems, on our desktop system. So just assume or imagine like that these are the network interface card, and a VM can more than one interface vNIC, as well as a vNIC can have more than one IP. Like by default, private IP need to be there to set up any VM for to work. It is optional that whether the public IP is required or not, but the private IP is must to start a VM, and it will the private IP will assign to the vNIC, and vNIC will be the part of the subnet. And the firewall, which we covered yesterday on the network security group, that will be attached to this vNIC, which will work like what kind of connection can be in or what kind of connection will be out. Let me show you in the pictorial view also. So this is the VM which will connected with the one NIC, and this NIC will be connected with this NSG, which is a firewall, right? And this is the part of a virtual network. And as I mentioned that the managed disk is, I will explain more on that. These are the block disk on which our operating system and our data will reside, our application data will reside, right? So we can attach the root volume as well as the multiple data volume, and this temporary volume is something that physical SSD on host, as I mentioned that a physical host or the local SSD we call. So these are the temporary, storage for which we can use for the caching and some other purposes. And these are the storage account, which is the object storage or unstructured data. We can put our diagnostic log. Let's say if we want to troubleshoot something, and something happened at a OS level, if we want to troubleshoot what happened, or maybe our application made some change, or maybe our some admin did something for which you are not able to do the SSH, or something happen on operating system level. So these diagnostic logs are helpful to troubleshoot, right? So before even demo, just maybe quickly, I want to cover about the other services. So Kubernetes is, everyone knows the going from the last 3-4 years at a very big scale or a big word. Everyone is running to learn about Kubernetes. So again, it is following the master node kind of architecture, and managing a master node is the most important, so that the worker node will be in sync and take a command from the master node, that how the pods and containers will be reside and hosted on all these worker nodes. So managing the master node is also again a tough job, because we need to achieve a quorum, so that in case of any one failure, who can take a role of a master until the other, the failure node will get repaired and all those things. So Microsoft Azure is providing this as a managed service. Our master plane or master node is managed fully by Microsoft, and it is highly available, so that we can focus on our application development and our containers, rather than building the infrastructure from scratch for Kubernetes services. And the container instance, I mentioned that these are, you can say, the serverless Docker container runtime that we want to quickly host couple of containers to test, to maybe expose for the HTTP purpose. So there this Azure container instances come into picture. Azure functions are the serverless service which you can think as resides between the platform as a service as well as the SaaS as a service, or the software as a service. So this is the layer which will give us a functionality as well as a new kind of different model, that we will pay only for the time the function took to run, or function took resources to run, or maybe it may be in a second, or maybe even under some hundreds of milliseconds, depend upon what kind of logic we are putting. But these are the functions which we need to write in supported language like Node.js, Python, .NET Core, and PowerShell. I believe it is also available. So these are the thing we need to put, and this will trigger. We need to put we need to connect it with the other, let's say some input will happen and then the output will happen. That is the whole logic which Azure functions will run. Simple, a very common example is, let's say our website is having some kind of image gallery, and the user is uploading the image. It's in some a bigger dimension. So as soon as the picture is uploaded and reached at our storage, right, so this function will trigger and it will create some thumbnail of a different dimension, and it will store on some targeted some storage, so that our application will be able to read and maybe it will be able to show. So there we don't need to put a dedicated infrastructure or virtual machine farm to do all this kind of logic, because these are just trigger when the the trigger will happen from the input side. It's not that every time it need to run. So that is where this Azure functions are playing a major role. There are endless use cases. People are using in a very different way. You can explore from the Azure architecture center about all these things, and learn about like how you can use it with your architecture and where it will fit best. So dedicated host is something that it is again the physical host, and as I mentioned, it's a multi-tenant, but there are some kind of compliance requirement. Lot of industries are having some kind of strict requirement that the customer or that business need to follow certain requirement, and that environment need to have a full visibility of maybe a physical socket, or the single tenant environment, so that there will be no traffic, or no it is not shared with any of the other cloud customer. So Microsoft Azure is providing the dedicated host, and even it will help in couple of cases of bring your own license model. Because let's say you have some kind of the proprietary database, and your business and company invested heavily, and now you are moving to Microsoft Azure, and that provider is supporting the licensing model on Microsoft Azure. So you can use your existing license, because the business is already invested heavily to purchase that license, so that license can be reusable. So that model is called as a bring your own license. So in such kind of scenarios, this dedicated host come into picture. And MS SQL is something that Microsoft homegrown database engine, and they are providing in a different flavor. Like from the infrastructure, we can install it on a VM, and there is something new service known as a manage instance, for which we will get the full OS level capability, but still the high availability and all those things is managed by Microsoft Azure. And then for the platform as a service, now try to understand and think that there is always give and take, right? If we are taking the advantage not managing operating system, we are losing some kind of, you can say, the functionality. That is the most important part, regardless of any cloud platform as a service, especially in the case of databases, right? The database which you run on the virtual machine, because then you will have OS level access. And the same database, if it is running on the platform as a service, and there is no OS level access, and some kind of functionality will be missed or not able to consumed directly. So that is where we are maybe compromising, or the different use cases are always there. This debate is endless. Some people want to stick with the VM kind of architecture, and they are happy to build and manage the complexity for high availability patching and all those things. Some are happy to go with, you know, the platform, this platform as a service model. Keep remember, maybe important thing, you can note it down: 6 R's, 6 R of cloud migration. So these 6 R's rely between like rehost, replatform, refactor, retain, repurchase, retire. So these make a huge difference. So, or you can say these kind of frameworks are there which will decide or which we can follow to start the cloud journey. And nowadays the cloud native come thing into picture, because if we are going to build an application from scratch, rather than focusing on the first step of this setting the VM, maybe it can be fully serverless or fully container based. All such kind of things are there. So these are the key important, things which really need to be clarified to learn about cloud. It's not only just watching some tutorial and sitting for exam. I highly recommend to learn and uh, to understand about the surrounding ecosystem also. So VM skill set is a feature in which we can design something that what will be our base. Let's say our application is installed on our virtual machine, and that can be the base of our virtual machine scale set. And we can utilize it to create a clone automatically of our application. And there are then DevOps kind of strategy and process come into picture when we can update our application, how our VM scale set will work. And these are a bit advanced level concepts, but try to understand that VM scale set is come to provide the auto scaling feature to our infrastructure, and especially the VMs. So now the demo time. I am going to start a demo. Let me share. Okay, so this is my portal. I believe everyone will be able to see my portal now. So I'm going to create a virtual machine. Even as I mentioned on day one, we can follow the free tier one. So free tier, from the free services, they will give us a the handy dandy shortcuts and very less options we need to fill. And just again showing, there are, you can see, only two things, or you can say this single plane we need to fill, single page we need to fill, and we can create it easily. But I'm taking the full-fledged, maybe you can say the long route. So I'm going to see, click a virtual machine, or again you can search it from here, the virtual machines, and you will land to this page. There is no virtual machine as of now in this account. I'm going to create it from scratch. So this is my subscription. Again, subscription name can be anything. I'm going to create a resource group as it's a logical container, and VM name, I'm going to put VM day 3 something. If it is available, it will give us this tick mark. And here you can see there is something showing that this Southeast Asia region is experiencing some issue, because due to the current situation, the cloud demand is huge. Everyone is relying and utilizing. So it may happen because at the end the physical data center have some capacity. Maybe it is 100x more than the data centers we see, or maybe 1000x more. But yes, it may face some kind of experience. So that is why it is highlighting, and Microsoft is alerting us that it may happen that our deployment will fail. So let's go and select with the US region. And as I selected the US region, it is showing. And now these are the important option. I have not put it in the PPT because I want to explain it via the demo. Because as I mentioned on day one about how the physical infrastructure is created, let's spend maybe a minute or two here. So availability zone is something that in a single, you know, in a single region there will be multiple physical locations which can be a 10 to 50 miles apart from each other, and creating a one region overall. So these different multiple locations which are the part of this region is called availability zone. So Microsoft recently started, not recently, maybe 2 years back, they started following this concept of availability zone. Otherwise, previously they just always follow that their region is something, a 2 to 3 football size, football field size physical locations, and they are building their data centers in such kind of location. But they understand like this availability zone concept is something, maybe much more redundant, so that is where they started providing this. So it is giving me the option, asking that whether I want to put it in the availability zone or not. Important thing is here that availability zone is not supported in every region, so you need to make sure like in which region you are going to deploy. So according to that you can make your choice. Availability set is something that, as not every region is as no every region is not supported the availability zone. So availability set is something, again giving example of that physical location of 2 to 3 field football field, ground. And let's say our one virtual machine is hosted on a one physical rack, which is maybe the one end of that physical, physical data center, physical location. And the other, if we opt for the availability set, so Microsoft will make sure that our other VM will not be hosted on the same physical host. Because of, if let's say one physical host, due to some issue went down, right? So availability set will make sure the other will be maybe apart from the one, so that the, the business continuity will be there and application will be served seamlessly. So let's start with this availability set. Right now I don't have any availability set, because I will create in this demo the 2 VM. So I will show. So I'm just giving some number. The fault domain is something which is for failover. Maximum fault domain is for the is 3. It is something like that you created the 4 VM. So if your fault domain is 3, so it means the the chances are your fourth machine may be resides on the same physical host where your VM number 1 is hosted. So it is something that logic Microsoft is following from the, initial days of this virtual machine services. And update domain is, it is something that, while because Microsoft need to update their, that orchestration layer or their software defined Microsoft Azure control plane. So, or maybe the physical host, let's say some kind of vulnerability, some kind of CPU vulnerability came into picture. We saw even in last year and in 2019, even in 2018, a couple of CPU vulnerability came into picture. So every provider need to patch and it need a reboot. So this update domain will make sure that, again, not of your every machine in the availability set will go down simultaneously. It will make sure the business continuity will be there. So this can be 20. I'm going to stick with maybe 3, 5, just randomly. So I just created this, and here I can select what operating system I want to use. So I am okay with Ubuntu. You can choose if you want like Windows, or and even Windows 10 is available on Microsoft Azure only as a VM, right? So I don't want the spot instance. Spot instance is a very common model nowadays. So it is something that the unused capacity, because Microsoft at the end running the physical data center, and the cooling, the power, everything is provided day in and day out. So Microsoft also want that those spare capacity can be utilized in some way, so that their data center will run at a full capacity. So that is where this Azure Spot instance come into picture. We can pay maybe 90% of the original per hour price to use the Spot instance, maybe for some temporary work, or some kind of some batch job and all these things. I'm not going to cover this. This is maybe an intermediate level, and you can check this also. A very new feature here. Here come into the sizing part. This is where it is by default putting some filters. Let me close all these filter, and you can see all these sizes. These are the, the names from which, or the classes from which these VMs are, what I can say, categorized. Like some classes belong to the GPU base, some classes are the high CPU but low memory ratio, some are the high memory ratio, some are specific for SAP, some are specific for some different purpose, some is specific for machine learning and all these. So you can see that is why it is showing. And not, again, not every size is available in every region. That is an important point to take a decision while designing the architecture. So, and here it is showing some estimated cost, and if 1 2 3 4, it is showing the generation part also. So let's select, and let's select with something D2S. So S is something which supports the SSD, or you can say the high performance storage disk, right? And here even you can see each of these, or some older generation are not supporting this temporary storage, as I explained about that local physical SSDs. So it is showing that this much amount of, by default you will get, if you select this size, there is no extra cost for, especially for this storage. This is the cost involved for running it for a month, right? So these are again the estimated cost, and it is showing the premium disk support. Premium disk is the high performant SSD backed. So let's select some D series. I am okay with this general purpose, in which I will get 2 vCPU and 8 GB of RAM, and it can support maximum of 4 data disk. Again, a data disk can be a size of 1 or 4 TB byte to 32 TB byte, right? So we can, 4 GB byte to 32 TB byte, right? So it is showing like what we will get, and I'm going to select this. You can again scroll down here. I believe everyone got their account. You can play with that, and or you can play it from the, or learn it from the documentation also. So here I just selected this. Again, I don't want to put any SSH key, but yeah, it's not a good practice in the production environment. Make sure you use the SSH key mechanism rather than the password base. So here I always make a typo while typing of this of password. Again, I think I am making some mistakes. I'm really very bad in typing password. So here, as I mentioned yesterday, I showed about in the network demo that we need to open the port. By default, it is giving the option. It will create a rule in our attached network security group. Yesterday we have not selected, and I showed that the connection was not able to establish. Then I added, and then I was able to SSH into. Today I'm going to follow it with the selected port. Even if I want port 80 and port 443, I can open, like, if you can say, the handy dandy shortcut here. So let's go to the next step. So as it is mentioned that it is supported the premium SSD and standard SSD, obviously the performance price will be there. So make sure do the proper study on that part, like which will fit best. So premium SSD is the most expensive as well as the most performant. So I'm going to select that right now, because I will cover more on the storage part and the features in our tomorrow class. So stay tuned for the tomorrow class to learn more about the storage part. So encryption, I am going with Microsoft, because everything is encrypted by default. I don't want to create my own encryption key, and I don't want to manage it, because it is another a different process, and your managing key, it is really required, because if we lost that key, then it will be tough to recover the data. So keep remember all these things. So this is our OS disk. Let's say I want to attach some new disk, so that I even create here, and I need to select that, as I mentioned, that from 4 GB byte to 32 GB byte. And this disk come with the this a tiering name. It is not that we randomly choose, like I want 10 GB, I want, let's say, 20 GB. If we are going with this premium SSD, and even in standard, we need to select these kind of sizes. Even with the standard HSD HDD, these are the older, or hard disk backed devices. So these are the sizes available, but for the premium it started from the 4 GB byte. So I'm okay with that. Let's say I want something 500 GB. You can see when I type 500, but it will select this 512 one. Sorry, 512 gigabyte. This is P20. So if I even create this, I will get charged for the whole 512. That is a, you can say, a catch or caveat here. So make sure just follow the proper thing, because you are going at the end, you are going to pay for the whole disk which is mentioned in that tier. So I'm done with this step and I'm going to do the network. As of now, there is no network or VNet created in this account, so it is asking the by default option that if it is okay. Yesterday I covered it deeply, that how the network and subnets work. So I'm going to proceed in the next step. So I want that, yeah, boot diagnostic log and all these. If I want even the OS level more granular logs, I can select it, right? So system identities are important. Let's say our one service or our application or our VM want to talk with another Microsoft service, and we don't want to store any kind of, the credentials on our operating system. So this is a mechanism. It will create, you can say, that temporary token, temporary token internally to talk with that service, and that will be expire and regenerate automatically. So these are something here. It is called as managed identity. You maybe heard about instance role or instance profiles in some other cloud platform. So this is what these kind of things are doing. And the beauty of Microsoft platform is their homegrown product ecosystem. If you are having the Azure Active Directory and you want to provide, and you have already created some hybrid connectivity, so Azure Active Directory, you can sync directly, or you can put it into your, that part of your domain, so that your user which are having already having the username password, they don't need to follow some new username password. They can use their existing username password. Another beautiful feature here is auto shutdown. Let's say I want to run it for maybe, you know, for some dev purposes for 7 hours, for 8 hours, and I don't want that manually every day I will come into portal and I need to shut down. I can, let's say, set it as maybe 11 p.m. I press something. Okay, I want that 11 p.m. I want to shut this down, and I will select my time zone. Right now I'm in this time zone, and it will send me the mail before shutdown. And backup is a different feature. Maybe tomorrow we will cover in our storage. So by 11 p.m. it will be automatically shut down, and I will receive a mail. So if you want this feature, the same with auto shutdown, and auto start is also there. So we can follow that. So here in the next step, extensions are another important thing. They have some third-party extensions. Let's say you are using Datadog. Datadog is a third-party monitoring, or monitoring tool. If you are using and you want to use the same Datadog because you have created the dashboard already, or your NOC team is following all those metrics, so you don't need to install the whole agent and everything. You can configure directly from here, and you need to put your API key from the Datadog. The same with couple of other extension. Let's say DynaTrace is something same like the monitoring and APM suite. Some NVIDIA, I have personally never used it. Maybe happy if someone explore, feel free to share. And the custom script, let's say I want to run some custom script, and I have written some bash script. While this instance will boot up, this script will run. So this is something, or even it can run later. It is something that without doing SSH, you can run the script later. That is the beauty of this extension. This can be configured at a later stage also. And the same with this cloud init. It is a startup script. It will only run once, and once at a boot time. Let's say I want to set up something, Nginx. I'm not writing the full script, but just typing so that you can remember that I want that while this server will spin up or instance will spin up, it will fetch the packets and it will install Nginx. So once the instance will be ready, I will get the public IP, the Nginx will be up and running, so that a piece of script I can paste here, and again it will run only once while the creation of this instance. That is important. So proximity placement group, it comes into the form of, you can say, HPC, high performance computing, or some kind of, some kind of process, or some kind of, what I can say, the data churning is going on, or some big data kind of thing. So because everything is a software defined network and software defined everything, and as I mentioned, from the availability set and all these things are located at a different location, and it need to be traveled through the network or a wire. It's an internal one. Obviously these networks are very secure and not, noisy one. But in the case of all these, research work or this big data, we need a huge computing power and, a very high throughput low latency thing. So this proximity placement groups plays the role. Even it is mentioned here, it is a very new feature. I believe it came only a month ago as a general available. So you can see the Azure resources physically closest together in the same region. So VM generation 1 again has the continuous enhancements going on. So all these things are here. I'm not going to play right now here. So tags, again, it's a good strategy to put a tagging, because it will really help for the billing and for the visibility for your application stack. And I just have enter, and I believe again I need to wait it for a couple of seconds. Yesterday even this happened, and it took couple of minutes, and today I believe it is showing the validation pass, and I'm going to click. uh, so it will take again couple of seconds to come up, as it's a Linux machine, and Microsoft is now pre-provisioned couple of things so that it will select, or it will spin up as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, I'm going to quickly spin up the another machine to fulfill our availability set concept. Again, I'm going to select the same, and VM class 2, and it is in US region. I believe, if you remember, in our last, while creating the first VM, we have set the availability set, and I'm going to put this is the availability set here, going with the same options, not making any change. Hope I will type the password correctly. And yes, this time I'm not going to attach any extra disk. I'm okay with the same network because it's only one network here. I'm okay also with all these options. I'm fine. And I'm going to create, and all these can be created using CLI. Let's say if we want to create 100 VMs, it can be created in a single command using CLI. If you know about AZ command set or PowerShell, it will be much easier. And another thing, while it is spinning and passing this validation, keep remember there are limits assigned to each of these resources. So by default, only 20 VM can be spin up in any region in under a one subscription. It is a soft limit. You can raise a request to increase, and they will ask like what is the purpose. Give a valid, solid valid business reason, and it will get increased, and you can utilize it more and more. By default, why it is not, there are multiple factor, because one is Microsoft also don't want that someone abuse their infrastructure and utilize, owning but not doing anything. Like as we are building, if I run it only for few, for the demo purpose, few minutes, you are okay, but if I'm not using, I am paying, and also I am claiming their infrastructure, right, which may be helpful for some other customer also. So another thing is, the limit part is so that the power of CLI, right? Let's say I ran a command which create the 100 VM, and if I have really the 100, unlimited resources limit, so obviously it will start get charging, right? And if it ran mistakenly and I forgot to remove all these, I will get a huge bill. So it will be a very, a big problem. So that is why Microsoft is putting such kind of, these are the soft limit. It is not that you can't spend more than 20 or 100. Give a valid reason, they will make sure the infrastructure or all these things will be available. So these all kind of things are the beauty of cloud platform, and Microsoft is doing and providing all these services feature very awesomely. right? So meanwhile, these things are spinning up. Let's see if our first VM is ready. I believe it is yes. We have just put this VM day 3, and here you can see we have this. Let me quickly SSH into this VM to show that we can do the SSH part. Let me open my VS Studio, and inside that I have installed this bash utility, and I have set up the username this, and here, yes, I believe you will be able to see that it is asking me again. I'm typing a wrong password. Let me see. I'm really bad in typing passwords. Yes, here we are inside our VM. You can see, right? It is the Ubuntu 18 VM, and we can see about our disk also. So we have attached by default this, and the new one, the disk which we have attached, that we need to mount, right? That even we can see that what kind of things are there. So here you can see 500 GB is as a unmounted. We can mount it, and then it will be usable. But keep remember, we are getting pay for 512 according to that SKU. So these are the things. Again, it come at operating system layer. It's nothing new, nothing magic. It's a, the Linux, the plain vanilla Linux command line. So I'm going to close this because no longer we will require this SSH session. So here you can see we will see many options. Couple of things we have covered, like extension. Security is the security center. This will we will cover on our day 6. Security, a dedicated lesson, a dedicated day on that. And availability set, here you can see that we have created, and it is okay. The will only configure, I believe, yes, we have created. Okay, so because the other is getting created, it will show then where it is hosted, and surely this number will be updated. Let the other VM will be get ready. We will see some updates here. So configuration, all these identity, as I mentioned, we can configure it with our AD or system assigned is something for the accessing the other services of Microsoft Azure without putting the credential on the VMs. Auto shutdown, I explained while creating. Now backup is something, this is another service, but if we want to set up a whole VM level backup, again it's a VM level backup. Even a disk level or even a file level backup is also possible while configuring, but just giving this is the another service, and integrated in this panel also, in this blade also we can configure. We can put our policies, let's say grandfather, father and son kind of policy. If you are following, just keep remember this GFS policy, that will surely helpful in your career, right? It is something that a 1 year of retention, then 1 month of retention, or 1 week or something. So we can edit this multiple policies here. The same with disaster recovery. It is something that we want, our VM need to be replicated some other physical location or physical this data centers of Azure, so that in case of, let's say, this US, due to some some kind of disaster, it will down, we can quickly fail over or switch over to our the uh, site B or our recovery site, so that our business continuity will be there. These are the out of the box feature. We don't need to install any third party software. There is no license fees. Obviously these services having its own charges, but it is not that we need to pay upfront for any kind of license. And all those things are here, right? These update management are something like, according to some enterprise policy, they don't want to patch their system frequently, or they don't want to down their system frequently, so they are following certain rules or certain norms. According to that, Microsoft Azure is providing that feature, and we can configure according to that. Our update policy will happen. Let's say if there are 100 VM and we put it to roll out in a batch of 10, so such kind of things can be easily configured there. Let me see if my availability set is working. Yes, here you can see now it is showing that the fall domain and update domain, so both are showing it as a different. So physically these both are hosted on a different host. This is what this thing signify. And if I add more, surely this number will change and it will go through 1 2 3 4 5 6 then this 0 1 2 and then again 0 1 2, these kind of it will replicate, and same with the update domains. And important another thing which I would like to really share about the monitoring and serial console is something, again, if even you lost the SSH access, in such kind of cases serial console, if you really know how to use the serial console, that will be helpful. So it's a very vast topic, but just want to set a ground to understand like the basics, the monitoring, all those things. Even I can show the how the networking and the NIC is connected. Even yesterday I showed that. So as we selected that SSH port, so the rule is already here. So this is our network interface which is connected with this thing, right? So this is the IP, it took it from our subnet. All those things are here. Now I just quickly want to move to the Kubernetes part so that we can create it easily here. Again, the nodes will be based out of VMs or this virtual machine, but it will be automatically configured to talk with our master plane, or you know our master, or our Kubernetes master. Again, I want that VM class 3 something. I'm just choosing this, even this region is facing some issue, but I'm okay. And it is showing what kind of which Kubernetes version I want to use. And it is showing the latest one they are providing is 1.17. I believe 118 is also out for the vanilla or bare Kubernetes, but for the managed service they are providing these kind of versions. So we can stick with that. And here it is asking how many node size, sorry, node count and node size. Again, the VM size depend upon what kind of computing power, the vCPU, RAM, as well as how many counts are required, and whether we want that virtual node will increase automatically according to the load, or we can set up. So here all those things come into picture. I'm not going to play it deeply here, but it is itself a big study, or big chapter. Surely I recommend to explore a little bit from your side these kind of services making our life so easy, right? So it will take a couple of minutes to even create, because it will create the three node cluster as well as the master node, and then it will provide us some DNS from which we can access the master node to run, let's say, command from kubelet. If you know about the Kubernetes world, that kubelet CLI, how we can create pods and how we can configure the replica set and deployment and services. So those kind of things will be easily managed. Important here is the VM part, VM skills that I try to explain. It is not, you will see here, it is a different service. VM skill set. Okay, yes, this is here. So yeah, important thing just I found there, it is mentioned some classic. So classic deployment was a previous old model which was called as a Azure Service Management, right? But it is now retired, but still, because the customer who are using it from, let's say, last 6 7 years, they are still utilizing that service model and they are not moving, or maybe there are some valid reason they are not moving. Azure still provide, but it is not recommended to go with the classic model. So VM scale set, we can configure it from here. For creating a VM scale set, we need to, let's say, have our golden image or our base image. Right now, I don't have any installed application or anything. I'm just giving demo quickly. Okay, again, this is giving error. Let's say this time, let's go with this thing, right? And I want that my skill set will increase in two different availability zone. Again, keep remember which region will support availability zone. Always check the documentation before designing the solution. I'm okay with this. Size is also this. Again, the tough point for me, writing a password always. And really it's very tough to keep remember of these passwords. Again, I missed something. Let me try it again. Okay. So this is still seems like the same options which we have used while creating the VM, right? But here things will start changing when it is asked for the scaling. like how many instances we want. Let's say I want to start with the five of my application server, and if I want to, okay, I'm okay with 5. After that I can increase the count. But if I want some automation, so here this thing come into picture, right? This is the beauty of auto scaling, that what kind of threshold and all those things I can configure, and I can put some kind of rules that how this will increase and how will this will decrease. So you can play it from your side, try to learn, try to explore. So these all our options are here. Rest you will, you will see it's the same like which we have, see in VM creation. Here it is asking beyond 100 instance. If we want, again, there are two different kind of, you can say the policy, not the scaling thing, right? This VM scale set even support the 1,000 instance at a single pool. So all these kind of things are here. That is why even you can see the, if the no scale set, then the placement, the max will be 100 VMs will be supported. But if we select is yes, it can support up to 1,000 VM inside this VM skill set. So I'm not going to create, but I just want to give a small walkthrough here. So Kubernetes also I explore, and maybe quickly about functions. So functions are something, again, a small block of a code which will do a specific task, and whatever their underneath infrastructure, a very small, let's say a very small container, it will die. Again, it is a stateless, and keep remember this function will not share any storage with anyone. There are obviously workaround are there, but by default, for a newbie, try to understand these are the stateless thing. It will complete the task and die. I'm just giving, and this need to be a unique, because it will connect with this DNS, and because it can be triggered from HTTPS or maybe outside of Azure ecosystem. So here I don't have any container, so I will go with the code model, and these are the code, languages which these Azure functions are supported. Let's go with the Node.js or Python, and these are the Python different version, and where I want to host, I'm okay with this. This is now important. Plan type, I explained about the app services on day one also, like the platform as a service, giving a environment to host our web application, to host our code. So it, if we are already using the app service, we can utilize if there is some kind of, computing power available, or our application is not consuming, but we have an app service plan for which we are paying, we can utilize that. But if we don't have the consumption, the serverless is, again, the model is, uh, it will charge only for the time the function will run. It may be milliseconds, and the round figure will be, 100 of millisecond or 1 second. So this is how it will get charged. So this function, I'm just going to next. There is nothing more on that part, because all those tagging and storage account for the logs and diagnostic. So I'm creating all these things. Let's see if any of other deployment have completed. So our Kubernetes, obviously Kubernetes will take at least 10 to 12 minutes, and this function will surely will, I believe, maybe minute or two, it will be up and running. So meanwhile, let me see what kind of questions are there. What is the salary for cloud engineer in Singapore? I believe it depend upon the company to company. Better you can check. There are much more valuable forums and website which can provide such kind of answer. Right. Could you please show a use case of Kubernetes containers and pod? See, Kubernetes is a management layer. Kubernetes itself not a container runtime or anything, right? Containers are, let's say, the lower level runtime in which your application will run. Pod is a wrapper around that which will maintain the amount of container, or which can have more than a one container. Pod is a very specific terminology to Kubernetes ecosystem. So Kubernetes itself, you can say, the software which will handle the task, which will take the task, and which will make sure the tasks are getting properly completing and distributed to the computing power, to the, to the nodes, and to these pods, and inside pods what services are going, or what application are going, health status, everything, right? Is availability set zone is another VM? No. Availability set is itself a service, or you can say again the logical uh, a logic which will make sure that two of our identical VM, let's say we have the Nginx server, right? We don't want to host, as I explained, that we don't want to host it on the same physical hardware. So there comes the power of availability set. It will make sure the VMs will be distributed into the two physical different hardware, so that if one fail, the another will save and another will start, or not at that time, but another will serving the traffic properly. Meanwhile, the failure one will getting repaired, or the VM will getting moved to the healthy host. So something like these are the logics to make provide the high availability and all those things, right? So I have spin up this, this function environment, and for to set up this function, it is not important here with Microsoft Azure is it is not, the browser inbuilt editor. It need to be run, or develop locally, and then it will push it here. And these are the, commands and the steps given, that how we can connect it with the VS code, and how all those things will work, and then function will be set up here. So guys, these are all the demos which today I want to show, and I believe this is helpful to understand about that how all those things are working. And infrastructure really, guys, a very important part. It is, you can say, the first step for any enterprise, because the enterprise migration, they all stick or still running their legacy workload and the application, and it is not a one night job to make it as a cloud native or containerize or quickly app modernization. Maybe the re-platform and re-hosting can be done, but again it will come with a cost as well as the time. So all these factors, you know are very valid and valuable to understand when we plan for any kind of migration activity and the adoption of cloud, any cloud roadmap, if we are designing for any of our customers. So that's all for today, guys. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to talk about the storage services, different kind of storage, and what are the feature and where it will fit best, and the use cases. So feel free to share, and please subscribe to my channel. It is very important because it will keep me motivated to create such kind of content. So see you tomorrow, guys.